Okay, guys, welcome back to our Cooper Book Club, Reading Between the Wines. We are currently on chapter 17, talking about stimulus control. So today we were going to start with faulty stimulus control. So faulty stimulus control occurs when a behavior comes under the restricted control of an irrelevant antecedent stimulus. So they're actually attending to another stimulus that has nothing to do with what you're trying to teach them. So for example, if you have two stimuli cards and one of them is actually larger than the other, then they start to memorize, oh, okay, it's the bigger one that's the answer. So then the fact that it's bigger is what gains instruction or stimulus control, not whatever it is that you're teaching them. Touch apple, and really he's just like, oh, every time I touch this big card, she says yay, so I'm just going to keep touching big card. And so he's not really learning what an apple is. He's more so understanding that, oh, whenever I touch the bigger card, she's happy and gives me my prize. So that is faulty stimulus control. And then I also really liked the example that like the SNABA girls give with like a booger on the stimuli card. So one of them has a booger, one of them does not. So then they start to pick that one with a booger every time because they know that that's the correct answer. So again, something completely irrelevant gains the stimulus control, and they're not really fully grasping the concept of what you're trying to teach them. So that's why consistency in your stimuli is really important. Okay, conditional discrimination. So in a simple stimulus discrimination, only one antecedent stimulus controls the response. So A and B, right? Simple A and B. Holding a cup under the tap on a water cooler and pushing the blue lever is simple discrimination by a person wanting cold water. The blue lever is an SD that signals the availability of cold water. Another example, a child touching a circle from an array of different shapes when the teacher says touch circle is a simple discrimination. Most stimulus control in everyday life is more complex than simple discrimination, described by the three-term contingency. Obtaining reinforcement often depends on discriminating the environmental context provided by multiple stimuli. So in conditional discrimination, the response that will produce reinforcement in the presence of a particular stimulus is conditional on the presence or absence of another stimuli. Pushing the blue or red lever when a friend asks cold or hot water, please, is a conditional discrimination. The friend request is the conditional stimulus, and the color of the water tap lever is the discriminative stimulus. Conditional discrimination is evidence in a child's correct response to the request. Point to the circle that has the same color as your shirt. The color of the child's shirt is the conditional stimulus that makes the same colored circle the discriminative stimulus. So that can be kind of confusing, but basically it's like taking it that step further. So now you learned which one is cold and which one is hot. So can you give me the correct water when I ask for it, is what they're saying that conditional discrimination is. So that's like the next level or the next step. So sometimes you'll see programs where it's like, if it's cold outside, raise your hand. Stuff like that. That's trying to get them to conditionally discriminate a little, like a step further from just that simple discrimination between A and B. Respondent eliciting and operant discriminative functions of antecedent stimuli. Does anybody have any questions or any example that they want to give on simple discrimination or conditional discrimination? Okay, so let's look at what it looks like in a laboratory setting. So now they're talking about respondent behavior. Stimulus control of operant behavior appears similar to the control of respondent behavior by a conditioned stimulus. Discriminative stimuli and conditioned stimuli are antecedent stimuli whose presence increases the frequency of some behavior. Applied behavior analysts, however, need to distinguish between the oh my goodness, why can I say that word? Evocative, oh my goodness, function of SDs for operant behavior and the eliciting function of conditioned stimuli for respondent behavior. This is a crucial distinction for understanding antecedent control of operant behavior. So in the lab setting, he presents food to the dog. The food is the unconditioned stimulus that elicits the conditioned response of salivation. The experimenter then introduces a buzzer sound, which is a neutral stimulus. The buzzer sound does not elicit salivation. Then after several trials of pairing, so we're back to basics, stimulus, pairing, the buzzer sound with food delivery, the buzzer becomes a conditioned stimulus that elicits salivation, a conditioned response. In the absence of food, an unconditioned stimulus. So this is really, really, really basic, but very important for you to understand because a lot of what we do comes from just this one little scenario of how respondent conditioning works. So just being able to distinguish what is happening there. So they're pairing the neutral stimulus with the unconditioned response, and then eliciting a behavior in the presence of whatever it was that they paired it with. Discriminative and motivational functions of antecedent stimuli. Distinguishing the nature of antecedent control of operant behavior can be difficult. Discriminative stimuli and establishing operations share two important similarities. Well, I can tell you, they're both antecedents, right? So your EOs and your SDs or S deltas or whatever, those are both going to be antecedent stimuli. So both occur before the behavior of interest and both have evocative functions. To evoke a behavior means to occasion it or call it up. So behavior is a response to some environmental stimuli, right? So that, like understanding that one little portion, so behavior is a response to some type of environmental stimuli, is giving you this same concept. So what they're saying is the behavior was evoked by something that happened in their environment. So they make it so difficult to understand, but that's basically what is happening. You're evoking a response by using those EOs and SDs. So that's what gives it that evocative characteristic, or that's what's evoking the behavior. Okay, so to evoke behavior, so we're basically summoning the behavior. The question often becomes, was a particular response evoked by a discriminative stimulus, the SD, an establishing operation, or both? So a lot of people get the SDs and the EOs confused because they both come before and they both can have that evocative characteristic. Um, so I guess just really, really breaking it down into those ABCs and seeing what is happening. In some situations, an antecedent stimulus changes, evokes a response, and the functional relation appears to be an SD. For example, in a typical shock escape procedure, an animal is placed in an experimental chamber. Shock is administered until response terminates the shock for a designated period. Then the shock is reintroduced until it again terminated by a response, and so on. An experienced animal escapes the shock immediately. In such situations, some would say the shock serves as an SD. The shock, the antecedent stimulus, evokes a response that is negatively reinforced. The shock is removed. In this situation, however, shock does not function as an SD. To repeat an important point, an SD evokes behavior because its presence has been correlated with the differential availability of an effective reinforcer. So always remembering that the SD has been paired. It has a functional relation to something. So the SD is telling me what my consequence is going to be. So anytime you see questions like that, just remember that your SD and your C, your consequence, are related. So my SD is going to signal that reinforcement is available, or my S delta is going to signal that reinforcement is not available. So they have that functional relation. That's a very important thing to remember as well. Okay. Those are fun to talk about, but I think we can keep on going. Okay, developing stimulus control. Okay, basic procedure for stimulus discrimination training. So this is something that I really like about Cooper, is that it gives you instructions on how to do things. And I often reference Cooper for like writing programs because it's really helpful because it breaks everything down step by step for you. Stimulus discrimination training. The basic procedure for stimulus discrimination training entails a simple schedule with antecedent stimulus conditions representing each component schedule. So response in the presence of one stimulus condition, SD, are reinforced, and the response in the other and the presence of the other stimulus, S delta, are not reinforced. So basically that was what I was explaining to you guys earlier about the functional relation. The SD is telling us that reinforcement is available. S delta is telling us that reinforcement is not available. So it says behavior analysts often describe the conventional procedure for discrimination training with differential reinforcement as altering conditions of reinforcement and extinction, meaning that a response produces reinforcement in the SD condition, but does not in the S delta. So this simple discrimination training, we use it for everything. And they're saying that it's like, basically you're alternating conditions where you're reinforcing one, and then you're using extinction for the other one. So no longer providing attention for screaming, so that's my S delta. So no longer providing attention for screaming, instead giving them attention when they raise their hand. So I'm trying to teach them simple discrimination of screaming gets me no attention, raising my hand gets me attention. So we use this concept in everything that we do. But yeah, so it's basically telling me, yes, I'm going to get it. No, I'm not going to get it. And so once I learn to discriminate between the two, I'm more likely to engage in the behavior that's going to get me to reinforcement and less likely to engage in the behavior that doesn't get me what I want. Teaching conditional discrimination. Okay, so it's telling us about match to sample. So a pigeon is presented with 3 horizontal keys to peck. The middle key was illuminated with the color to start the trial. A peck on the illuminated key turned it off and lighted 2 side keys. One of the side keys was the same color as the sample color, illuminated on the middle key. A peck on the side key with the same color and the same key produced reinforcement. Error responses were not reinforced. So Skinner's matching to sample procedure included the 3-term contingency. So SD is the key that had the side color that was matching, and then the key peck was his response. So he saw the signal that reinforcement was available, which was the key that matched the one that he was supposed to pick. So in response, he pecked the key, and as a result, he gained his reinforcement. So it's a basic contingency, and it's part of what we use for basically everything. The other day, I was trying to teach my dog. She's very smart because I've been using ABA on her. She's a puppy. She's 1 year old now. I was trying to teach her simple discrimination, basically. So my daughter and I, we were studying like letters, and some of them had animals. So let's say like it was like A for alligator and C for cat. I would hold up the cards to my dog, and I would tell her touch cat, and she would like, she can high five. So she was just high fiving whatever picture, but I would only give her the good girl when she would touch the correct one. And so in the beginning, I was using like my least to most prompting. Well, I was actually doing most to least, because in the beginning I was grabbing her paw and touching it to the cat, and I would tell her good job whenever she would touch the correct one. So that's just the basic 3-term contingency, and teaching them those simple discrimination by providing reinforcement for only the response that you want to increase, and not providing reinforcement to the response that you don't want to increase. So the alligator picture, if she would touch that one, I wouldn't give her praise. And I'm just trying to teach my dog how to discriminate between an alligator and a cat, which was silly, but it was fun. So we also have the 4-term contingency. 4-term contingency comes under contextual control. Condition discriminations operate at the level of 4-term contingency. So the 4-term contingency is now adding motivation into the picture. So I'm either satiated or deprived of something, therefore causing, oh, I have a really good example that I wanted to share with you guys. So this weekend, I took the kids to a Japanese festival, and we live in Texas, and so it was hot, like 100 degrees, like burning your head hot. Um, and so as soon as I got there, I automatically like needed an umbrella, um, or a hat or anything, you know. So in that moment, the motivation was that my head was burning and that I was melting and that I needed shade. So in that moment, um, an umbrella or a hat was so important to me. So I was walking through the little vendors and I saw somebody that was selling like those straw hats. So my response to that SD, so that SD was signaling that shade was available. So my response was that I was going to purchase that hat. So I basically was like forced into buying this hat because I was so hot. So that was like an example of that conditional discrimination, using the 4-term contingency. So Selena is at a festival and she's melting and she sees a big hat. As a response to that, she buys the hat, and then her reinforcement was she got shade and her head was no longer on fire. But I thought that was a really funny example because the fact that it was so hot influenced a lot of our decisions on what we were going to buy. So all of the umbrellas were sold out, like the little Asian umbrellas that are all cute. They were all sold out because everybody was on fire. And those hats, like, when am I ever going to use that hat again? Probably never. But it was very much needed in that moment. So my behavior was so strongly influenced by that EO, AO motivation aspect, as well as my kids. So my kids, they were able to take their money, and the things that they bought were really funny, like a fan, the little fans that you hold. So those purchases or those responses to the environment were so strongly influenced on the fact that it was so hot. So it's really cool to me. In my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, that festival just like ABA'd us. They forced us to buy umbrellas, hats, lemonade, the little fan, all of our purchases or all of our responses to the environment were because of that environmental condition, was the fact that it was super hot. But yeah, I just really like that example and I wanted to share it with you guys.
That was a good one.
I was like nerding out. I was like, oh my gosh, like we just bought all this random stuff just because it was so hot.
We see that all the time in Ghana. You know, when it's raining, everybody's rushing to buy an umbrella, and we sell on the street. So you see the women with the umbrella pushing to you, umbrella, 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 because you want to grab one.
That's funny. And then they probably charge you more when it's raining.
Yeah,
they're like, oh, well, let's charge them more. Yeah, because it's so needed in that moment that they're gonna do whatever it takes to get it because they don't want to be wet. Or in my situation, I didn't want to be so hot. But yeah, I thought that was so funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Teaching concepts, so it breaks it down even more on how to teach it, distinguishing examples of the concept from similar non-examples that lack one or more of the defining must-have features. Identifying examples of the concept across a wide range of varying examples that include non-defining can have features is stimulus generalization. Okay, I feel like this is something that we should remember. Simple discrimination and stimulus generalization. So stimulus generalization, that is where they're able to generalize across multiple stimuli. So I taught Peace how to identify an apple using a picture of an apple. And then I showed her a green apple and she still called it an apple. And then I showed her a yellow apple and she still called it an apple. So those are all different types of stimuli, or maybe a fake apple in the pretend kitchen. She saw that and knew that that was an apple. So she was able to generalize across multiple stimuli. That's why it's also important that whenever you're teaching a new skill, that you are using multiple stimuli for that same thing, and not just teaching them with one picture of an apple and that's it, only reinforcing that picture of an apple. So let's say in the real world, somebody's like, Peace, can you pass me the apple? She has no idea what they're asking her, because she has only learned apple using that one 2D apple, and that's it. So conditional discrimination is really important when teaching generalization or trying to get generalization. I can also give you guys an example of like when you program as a BCBA, you want to make sure that if you're teaching something, that you're teaching two of that something at a time. I think I've already told you guys this, but like if I'm teaching motor imitation, then I want to make sure that I'm teaching two separate ones at one time so that they're able to discriminate between the two, and they're not just learning that when I say do this means this, you know, because next time when I try to introduce do this, when I'm like do this, they're like, because they're not able to discriminate between multiple SDs because they were only taught one at a time. And so I've also seen that with manding. So we're teaching them manding, right? Because we really want to influence their communication, and we want that to increase. So we're focusing really heavy on manding. And so you taught them to use one word, you taught him then how to use two words, and then you taught him how to use three words. Now he uses full sentences, and you're like, okay, yay, good job. We're using full sentences. Now I'm going to try to ask him a different question, like, what are you doing? And he's going to say, I want coloring. So because we weren't teaching two verbal operants at the same time, he has only learned how to mand. And so now other like interverbals or tacting or all of that you can kind of see how you're making their responses very rote. So it's really important that we switch up the stimuli and the settings and all of that to make sure that they're generalizing and that we're introducing multiple things at one time, so that it doesn't accidentally get the wrong, get some type of faulty stimulus control. Okay, maybe we should talk about concept formation, and then we can take a pause, or should we?
I was saying that if you teach 2 items or 2 SDs or 2 stimulus, don't they get confused?
What do you mean? Like,
if you have 2 as like do this, hands up, hands down, if you are teaching both simultaneously, don't they get confused?
they might get confused, but they're gonna start to, they're going to eventually start to discriminate between do this and do this instead of just do this, gaining the control of this.
Okay.
So you want to try your best to teach them the two different ones at one time so that they learn to discriminate. So sometimes when like higher BCBAs do audits like on your program books, that's something that they look for. They are like, are they programming for conditional discrimination, or are they only focusing on one thing at a time and then causing these little babies to become kind of robotic in that way, where do this becomes this.
My supervisor always say that teach one until he or she gets 80 to 100%. Then you teach the other one and you do random rotation.
But
so it takes a very long time.
But do you ever see them get it mixed up when you ask them? You're like, do this, or
Yes,
you're teaching them a new one,
do.
and they get stuck. They're always just clapping their hands. They get stuck on clapping their hands because it wasn't programmed for them to learn discrimination. So what gained the stimulus control was the do this word. And so now every time she hears do this, she's like, instead of like actually paying attention to what I'm trying to teach you, which is imitating. So sometimes you can even remove the SD if you can. That way it doesn't accidentally get the wrong stimulus control.
Okay.
So I sometimes will do that where I remove the SD completely. And try to get them to imitate me without saying do this or without saying like me, because all of those things might accidentally get that stimulus control. And so it's like and it makes you feel bad now that you know, because you're like, oh my gosh, I was teaching them maybe wrong because I didn't put 2 at one time, so I wasn't really training for discrimination. I was just training for memorization for one thing.
I have a 3-year-old boy. I was teaching him how old are you and how are you. So he gets messed up all the time.
Yeah, they always get those mixed up. Like, how old are you?
And then they say, I'm 3 years old. No.
Yeah, you ask them, how are you? And they're like, I'm 3.
Yes.
You're like, no, how are you? Yes, those are hard. Sometimes maybe you can use like a if they can read, like use a visual textual prompt. Yeah. How are you? Not how old are you?
My 3-year-old boy, he can read, so I do a lot of text with him.
Yeah, that would be good for teaching him conditional discrimination. Try that next time to be running them both. Okay. But have a textual prompt, like one says, how are you? And then one says, how old? And so then he starts to discriminate. The one that says, how are, is the one where I say, good, I am fine. And then the how old is the one that I say, I am 3. Okay. So that is you teaching conditional discrimination between the 2, because you're doing them both at the same time, but you're offering some type of signal that is helping them to differentiate between the 2. So that's another thing that you always want to make sure that you like think about when you're programming, is like, is this clear? Like, is my SD clear enough for them to know this is what's going to get me reinforcement? And sometimes it's not clear enough for them. So then we add extra things like, textual prompts or color cards. Like I know for one of my clients, I'm teaching weighting. And so just the word weight was not, he wasn't understanding that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to use my stimulus pairing, and I'm going to pair something else with it to signal that he needs to wait. And so it's a card. On one side, it's a stop sign that says wait. On the other, it's a red stop sign that says wait. On the other side, it's a green that says go. And so whenever I present the SD wait, I also put down the red stop sign. So that one, so he's starting to learn, okay, when she says wait and the stop sign comes out, that means I need to wait and I can't grab the item or whatever I'm waiting for. So that way he starts to discriminate between wait, and then when the time is up, then I flip it to green and it's like, okay, go, here you go. Or whatever. And so that can also help, like his mom, in case she's in a meeting, in a Zoom meeting, and he comes to try to talk to her, she can just put the card, wait. You could even pair the finger that tells you wait, so just pairing different things to help them to conditionally discriminate between what she wants me to do and what she doesn't want me to do. So you always want to be sure that you're making the what you want clear versus the what I don't want, just very, very clear. And so sometimes it takes us some modification of our behavior in order to help them to understand.
Yeah, I was teaching my boy wait, and then I was counting him down 5 to 0. And then he also learned it. So when I say wait, then he start counting himself down until it's 0, then he grabbed that stuff.
Yes, that's perfect. I do that too. Like I'll program wait with the hand cue. So you'll tell him wait. Good job. Here you go. And so you paired it with the counting, and so then they start to do the counting too. But at least now he's understanding. Okay, yeah. When those fingers are gone, or when all her fingers are up, I can get the item. And also timers can help. So like setting a timer for the 2 minutes or whatever he has to wait, you put the timer and put it somewhere he can see, and you can point to it and say wait, or something like that. And so just making it very clear what is going to get me reinforcement. Oh, okay, it's when I wait until that timer is done and then I can get it. Okay, cool, now I understand. So now I'll do what she wants me to do. But yeah, it just takes some thought on our part, and just making sure that we are making setting clear expectations is what they call it.
Okay.
But I'll go ahead and pause the recording there.